So Bitcoin is still tackling that 64,000 or the middle of this range. But today is not about Bitcoin. It's actually about the other big one, which is Ethereum, because next week we get the first ETH ETF trading on the markets. And if you look at ETH hasn't started moving. What is this actually saying about ETH? And should we be buying ETH? Or will there be a better opportunity to buy ETH as soon as the ETF starts trading? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Also, I've got a great panel here with 3 guests for you, and they're going to be revealing what sectors they are investing in between now and the next part of the bull market. So Friday it is, Big Friday Banter. Let's get this show on the road, guys. I love Fridays because Fridays are the days where we get the most alpha in this channel, and the reason is because it's not only me bringing you the alpha, but it's me and 3 guests, and today's actually no different. We've got amazing guests here on the channel. So I don't want to delay the alpha too much, so let's just get through the formalities. Number 1, if you ain't subscribed to the channel, you know what to do. Smash the subscribe button. Help us get to 1 million subscribers. We are the only channel that actually grew through this little bear trap or whatever you want to, bear whatever you want to call it that we had. Also remember, our Friday shows are brought to you by our best sponsor, our longest standing sponsor on the channel. And that is, of course, NordVPN. And I always say to you guys, we're going to make a lot of money in crypto. And you may lose some money. I don't mind if you lose money on a scam. I don't mind if you lose money trading tokens. I don't even mind if you lose money trading leverage. What I do mind is if you lose money to a hack, or you get exposed by your government and you land up giving money to your government that you shouldn't have given to your government. So in order to mitigate that, you need to get a VPN. Because what a VPN does is it masks your IP address. Now you can see I'm not surfing with a VPN now because this is a work laptop. What you can see is that right now my IP address is exposed. What does that mean? It means that every single DeFi application in the world, every single exchange in the world knows exactly which country I'm in. And therefore, when the government comes and asks them for exchange records, well, they can just give them these records. And the same for a DeFi application. Also, hackers know exactly where I am. That you don't want that. How do you mitigate that? Well, what you do, and you should be doing this if you're serious about your crypto, is just get a VPN. If you sign up for NordVPN, you pay $2.91 a month. You get an extra 4 months free. You get 30 days money back guarantee, and you get an eSIM. Now, if you don't know what an eSIM is, it's a SIM that you can put into your phone, and wherever you roam in the world, you get free data, basically. So sign up here. Support the channel. If you don't know where the link is, just click on the bottom here. It's this link over here. Also, what I recommend you do is pay the extra money and get the threat protection. The threat protection protects you against those malicious websites where you think you're going to a crypto website, but it's not, and then they drain your wallet. So pay the $8 a month. That's like your entry ticket into the game, and then you guys are A4 away. That's the first formality over there. The next formality over there is I set a challenge, and I wanted to give you guys first dibs in the challenge. And what I said is, guys, I'm funding 100 people to take a challenge with BitFunded. All you need to do is sign up to BitFunded, drop a comment on my Twitter with your challenge ID, and I'm going to randomly select 100 people, and I'm going to fund your challenge. Now, what are these challenges? Effectively, if you want to trade with other people's money, you need to prove that you're a good trader. So you buy a pack. The pack is either 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, 100,000. You trade with a demo account for 2 challenges. If you get 8% in the first challenge and 5% in the next challenge, you're then trading with other people's money, and then you're keeping up to 90% of the profits. Now, to get the show on the road here, I'm going to fund 100 accounts. What you need to do, you need to go and you need to sign up with an account, and you need to drop your challenge ID here like these guys have done, and I will actually fund your account. All right, now, without any further ado, we've had a hectic week on the markets. A lot happened on the markets this week. Let's get our guests in. Guys, welcome. To those of you who have been here before, welcome back. To those of you who are new, welcome. We've got Mike, we've got Ro, we've got Duncan, a great panel. Guys, I want to get a feeling from you about what you think about the cycle. So we had quite an eventful week. We were initially we were below, we were in the 54,000s. Everything was doom and gloom. The German government was selling. Then we had the Trump assassination attempt. Everything turned around. We now seemingly are going to get a pro-crypto president. And it just feels like the mood is much better out there. So question, do you think that we've seen the worst? Do you think that we're ready to start the up again? Let's go. Duncan, I'll go to you first, sir.
Yeah, sure. So I think like the last couple weeks I've been tweeting a lot, but obviously like the telegraph selling by the German government, they sold $3 billion worth of Bitcoin, like 2 billion worth in 1 week, which was pretty insane. And the market was kind of just getting out of the way for that. And then also you had the added, Mt. Gox FUD, which was, these creditors from 11 years ago got massive Bitcoin distributions. So that's playing out right now. We'll see how many people end up selling, but I think like we completely broke down our correlation from equities and kind of the rest of the traditional markets because of those two things. But Germany stopped selling on Friday, and then that Friday night there's that Trump assassination attempt. The bullet just grazed his ear, which was probably like the best thing that could have happened. His odds on stuff like Polymarket skyrocketed to 71%. Plus, he appointed JD Vance, which is like a pretty pro crypto VP. We also have them talking at the end of July at the Bitcoin conference. Trump's tweeted he wants the rest of the Bitcoins to be created in.
I don't know if you saw this.
In America.
I don't know if you saw this, but there was an announcement made by 𝗏𝗏. It says, breaking news, Trump to announce USA Bitcoin strategic reserve in Nashville. So they say at the event, he's going to announce that Bitcoin is going to be added to the US strategic reserves. I don't know if this is true. I guess we'll only hear next week, but I mean, this is quite big.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think...
I think that's probably a stretch.
Okay. I mean, look generally, Dennis is not that far off. I can't say whether or not he's going to be there or not. To me, it does feel like a new era. I'll show you one of the things that I'm looking at the moment, and maybe you guys can give us some insight here. So we saw the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ had a crazy week. It went up and it went down. And then we saw the Russell 2000. But the Russell 2000, which is a small cap stocks in the States, look at this week that the Russell 2000 has. In fact, I think they said it was one of the most aggressive weeks for the Russell 2000. And to me, that shows that there's a big appetite to move away from the top 7 into slightly more risk. And so for me, it almost feels like the US is going much more risk on. And that might be good for Bitcoin on the backdrop of a Trump presidency. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly it looks like we're going to have a pro crypto administration come 2025, and I also think there's a lot of talks of rate cuts too, which I think the time frame was going to be in September, and that could be a start of a series of rate cuts. So I think you're going to see more of that money that was kind of sitting in the safe U.S. Treasuries move into more risk-on assets, which is, of course, is going to be great for Bitcoin and all crypto.
So, I mean, what I've read on Twitter and other places is that generally when rates are decreasing, markets are also decreasing. And I went back and I actually checked the thesis, and it's true. In 2008, when rates decreased, market increased, but that was a black swan. And then just after COVID as well, rates were decreased because markets were decreasing. So that thesis holds true, providing that we don't actually get a soft landing like Powell says. If we do get a soft landing, it seems like Powell's really steering this plane very, very, very carefully now, almost like a pilot just about to hit the runway. And so this time may be different. How do you see it? Do you see like the 5.25% rate cuts that we could get over the next couple of years or year or two? Do you see that like boosting the markets up, or do you see that actually happening if the markets go down or something like that? Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I just think that we saw during COVID, just the crypto markets just go crazy when the rates were so low. So I think we'd like to see something like that. And we're hopeful for that. Yeah, will it be as nuts as it was back then? I think we're a little bit more mature market, but I think that it could be certainly a catalyst to for the move over from non-risk assets to risk on assets like crypto.
Ro, what do you think?
Yeah, it's good hearing all your guys' opinion. I generally agree. Just before I say anything, I have to say that informational purposes only for me here. Not
all
legal,
of us,
tax,
all of us. Don't worry, it's all in the disclaimer of the show. Everything we say, is financial advice. We don't do any entertainment and
Look, so rate cuts are one thing, but it's kind of crazy to say this, just given how crypto has evolved, where a presidential election in the U.S. is actually one of the most fundamental events on the horizon. Like, Rand, you've been in the space for a while. Back in like 2017, 18, no one really cared. Like crypto kind of operated in its own little isolated bubble. The chain reaction of sort of things that are being priced in here, which is, you know, if Trump is elected, you get JD Vance, who's, you know, there's some Twitter video that went out recently. Maybe you've seen it, where like he's basically taking the opposite view of Gensler, where he thinks that tokens that have utility should be the ones that are embraced, and the ones that are utility less have less of a place in American financial markets, which is basically the opposite of the 𝗕𝗢𝗘𝗧 and everything the SEC has said to this point. And I think markets have started to price in the sort of iterative reaction of Trump getting elected, Vance coming in, and then ultimately a new SEC chair being appointed. And I think that bodes potentially very well for tokens that get the most battered down because of that. So you're looking at things that have struggled to, you know, assign a value or cash flow or something to their token. They're kind of just putzing around as governance tokens. Those things could become quite bid into the election. I also think it poses a huge risk, right? Because when markets get positioned this way, which are basically, you know, kind of pricing in based off of prediction markets and polling markets, the tail risk on the other side is of course significant because it catches you really off guard, similar to how the ETH ETF news caught a lot of people off guard at like 3K, right? So you have to be really careful there. But overall, yeah, constructively bullish into Q4 of this year. I think where we are right now is sort of a mid-bull market consolidation. One thing I look at a lot is, you know, the x-axis of the chart, not just the y-axis, right? Thinking about the element of time and kind of how to play that into cycles. And for me, like kind of a broader thesis I have is that speculative capital can stick around in markets consecutively for like 2.5 to potentially 3 years. That's kind of like the 2020 to 2022 move. It's about like 150 weeks. And right now we're in about week 75 of since markets really started to come off the bottoms of the floors. The idea that, you know, this is like an actual top and 75 weeks was kind of it is a little bit ridiculous to me.
I think for anyone that's been here in a bull market, we know what the top of a bull market feels like, even though generally when we get caught up in it, we don't feel it, but this didn't feel like a top. There was no euphoria. There was no peak. Retail never even got you. Like in this cycle, honestly, the only people that I know that are trading crypto are people that have been here for a while or people that kind of half check out and started to come back. But retail hasn't got you. And I always gauge that based on the views to our shows. Like I know what our views are in the bull market, and I know what the views are in the middle market and a bear market. And I can tell you based on views alone and based on exchange trading volume, which is the two things that I'm working off here, we're in a bear correction in a bull market very similar to all the post-halving corrections. And that's just all the data that I've looked at actually gives me that feedback. And then I kind of say, well, if that's the case, why did we go so far up in the beginning? And that's because we had the ETF propping us up. And when markets overshoot, then what they do is they tend to go back towards equilibrium. And so the corrections are quite steep. Even though I must say, like for those of us that have been here before, this was not a correction. This is like a 25%. Like honestly, I remember being scared of corrections in the previous two bull markets. Like when a correction came, I remember shitting my pants. Like I didn't even flinch here. Like at no point in this correction was I scared. And that's, you know, either I'm seasoned or this was just a very gentle correction.
Yeah, definitely in Bitcoin, it was not bad, but in a lot of the alts, they got crushed. Because I think like you said, like retail hadn't really arrived, and you had this huge backlog of projects that had raised in like 2021, 2022, 2023, all launching into kind of the hype of this ETF, and not a ton of new retail money coming in. And then that just kind of dilutes all the projects amongst each other. So we've seen a lot of these altcoins go down 50 to 70%. Even though Bitcoin's only like, 20% off its all-time highs.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. And I think a lot of that, like you said, with the ETF, this sort of flavor of the buyer. Before, if Bitcoin pumped, it generally was crypto natives, and that speculative capital could rotate. But now when you have like big traditional institutions buying and holding the ETF, it's not like some new altcoin that launched is saved from going down 80% or anything like that.
Yeah, like that. The capital going into the Bitcoin ETF, I don't think is as likely to come into the rest of the market. But I do think that like the ETH ETF, could change that dynamic a bit. Just
let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So we got the ETF approval, and we got the ETF probably starting to launch sometime next week. They reckon probably 4 or 5 days from today, the ETF actually gets approved. Now, one thing that we need to pay attention to is this Grayscale Trust, which has $10 billion or $11 billion worth of ETH. They came out and they're charging a 2.5% annual fee, which is 10 times what any other fee is, which almost guarantees that a lot of this is going to be sold off. Like, people are going to look at this and go, hold on, let me just sell mine and then put them into others, unless there's a capital gain element or a short-term capital gain or a long-term capital gain, whichever one it is. So question now, how do you see, we'll talk about the long-term thesis in a second, but let's talk about the short-term thesis. When this thing starts to trade, are we going to be able to buy ETH at levels, like, are we going to get a dump? And I'll tell you why this excites me. Because ETH is not like Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a whole lot of supply overhangs. It has Mt. Gox. It has the US government. It had the German government. It has the Bulgarian government. All these unwanted token holders, so to speak, Bitcoin holders, so to speak. When I look at ETH, ETH doesn't have that overhang, which means that if ETH dips because of this ETH reserve, then to me, this may be one of the last opportunities where you've got a fake force in the market to buy ETH. Unlike Bitcoin, where there's always been overhangs. Ever since I got into crypto, there's always been overhangs. ETH's not like that. And so I'm really wondering whether or not you guys are bullish for the beginning, for the launch of the ETH ETF. Mike, what do you think?
I think it's I think you, like you said, you're going to see a lot of the the grayscale ETH, similar to how their Bitcoin fund rotated into all the other ETFs. But I think I'm kind of looking at it overall from a narrative perspective, right? You look at like Bitcoin, which was this whole narrative of like digital gold, coming mostly from this kind of economist point of view. And I think a lot of these institutions, if they get their kind of like technology hats on and their tech analyst hats on, right, where ETH is positioned as this, global settlement layer for permissionless finance, right? Cheaper cross-border remittances, permissionless lending and borrowing, kind of like I heard it referred to as like a financial app store almost, right? Where you get more of a future high upside kind of growth tech play rather than kind of a safer inflation play, inflation hedge play. I think that can be a very interesting, effective narrative that can help ETH have the ETH ETFs do extremely well.
What do you reckon if the Bitcoin ETF got $20 billion worth of flows in the first 5 months or 6 months? What would you say the ETH ETF gets after 5 or 6 months?
Oof, that's a tough question. I don't think it's going to be. I think Bitcoin has such a there's way more mind share overall of in people who are not already in crypto that way more than Ethereum. So I don't think it's going to be as high as the inflows as Bitcoin, the Bitcoin ETFs. But I think it could do really well. I think it could probably get up to 50-60% of those inflows. So I'm pretty bullish on it.
Duncan, what do you think?
Yeah, like I definitely think that the original GBTCs, like when this happened last time with the Bitcoin ETF, it caught the market a little bit more off guard that like all these entities were going to be selling a lot of this Grayscale product. I definitely think the market's processed that more. Like we kind of retraced the entire ETF announcement pump from when it was kind of surprised announced in June to now. So I think the market's definitely digested this more. In terms of the actual outflows, definitely if they're keeping their fee at 2.5%, they didn't adjust from what they did with GBTC. So they're going to be expecting outflows. If they'd come in and drop the fee to like 50 basis points or something, then you might think they're trying to retain more money. But it definitely seems like they're going to be expecting outflows. So I think, if the Bitcoin ETF's gotten 15 billion inflows in the past 6 months, I think maybe the ETH ETF will get like 5 billion, so like a third of that. But it's definitely, I think a lot of participants are more tempered coming into this since we saw it happen with the Bitcoin ETF.
Okay, so at those levels, do you think that in 3 months when we talk about ETH again, or let's say 30, let's not say 3 months, let's say 30 days after launch, is the price higher or lower than on launch day? 30 days.
Yeah, that's tough. I think it'll be higher, but like I'm not super confident in that.
Roy, what
I'm
do you
confident
think?
in like a longer term view.
Yeah, well, since you asked more about the short term, and I agree with Mike on like the long term thesis and stuff behind ETH, and particularly brought up 𝗖𝗍𝗄, which is really topical literally today, because I was looking this morning. 𝗖𝗍𝗄 was trading again at like sub 3K implied ETH. Like the discount really widened out this morning. And
because Grayscale announced the fees. Because Grayscale announced the fees. That's what happened.
Yeah, and they announced the ETH Mini, right? When they're basically saying, look, if you want to stick around in an ETH Trust product, you're going to have to take a taxable gain. And a lot of these guys have been there for years. Like I used to work at DCG, under DCG at Genesis for 5 years. Like these 𝗖𝗍𝗄 holders are pretty OG, and they've been there for a minute. And yeah, like you're going to have to sell 𝗖𝗍𝗄 to buy the ETH Mini ETF, which has the lower fees and the advantageous. I think like Grayscale basically learned from what happened with Bitcoin and are sort of doing this new approach or tactical approach where they're trying to retain as much fees as they can, knowing that the writing is on the wall for outflows, and creating a super low fee product and maintaining the super high fee product. So I think on ETF day, there will be some very good creation redemption arbs for the ETF desk as like 𝗖𝗍𝗄 is kind of sold naturally to go into this other product. But I also think there's an important consideration there if you're a holder of 𝗖𝗍𝗄 for a while, like is 2.5% a year worth it for whatever capital gain you want to potentially defer? So it's going to be very interesting next week, kind of how those two competing flows go in, which is basically what gets sold of 𝗖𝗍𝗄 and then what gets recirculated back into the ETH Mini versus ultimately exits. And on the broader topic of like just net inflows into the Ethereum ETFs generally, like I think, you know, we have high expectations here. Like, you know, we're talking about billions, whatever, relative to Bitcoin. I think the market is basically pricing in very low expectations. And I also think another reason the ETH sold off today to yesterday is because big tech sold off. And a lot of these guys that trade ETH versus big tech or ETH ETFs or ETH futures, they view it in the same bucket as like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Tesla, all this kind of stuff. So big tech will matter and the net inflows will matter. And really, I think they can only kind of surprise to the upside given where the expectations are. So if I had to like pick a side, right, like you can't go like, oh, the price is going to be flat in 30 days because that's a cop out. I would like to think that it's higher. I mean, if you think it's
you can say that. You can say that. No one's going to judge you, bro. If you think that, if you think that's the right call, then that's the right call.
Yeah, right there. I mean, it's probably moderately up, like flat up is my take. But definitely going to watch those flows really intensely, especially the ETH versus
Is the ETH ETF good for altcoins or is it just good for ETH? Like, does that kick off an alt season? Do we see, everyone's been talking about an alt season. Alts have been destroyed. You know that. I mean, except unless you've been in like in 10 alts, 𝗬𝗏, Solana, and like maybe 10 other alts, you've been destroyed. What does the ETH ETF do for altcoins?
Yeah, I have a pretty strong take on this, and I've written about this on Twitter a while ago. But basically, like the thing with the Bitcoin ETF is the people buying Bitcoin and like the original Bitcoin holders are just kind of like very stuck in Bitcoin. Maybe a few of them are going to like marginally rotate into other stuff or buy some ordinals, but ETH is just way more conductive to having, you know, inflows into that, having the ETH price go up, and then having that money trickle down into like DeFi. So like, you know, if ETH goes up, the TVL of these DeFi protocols is going to go up, the fees they generate are going to go up. Then that's going to make those alts worth more. That's going to kick off like new launches and new liquidity mining programs. That's going to make gas fees go up. That's going to make ETH look, you know, the ETH staking rate go up. That's going to make ETH look more valuable on a fundamental level. And you kind of kick off this cycle that we saw in 2021 where like ETH DeFi was exploding, and that's like very reflexive to the upside. So maybe we have a period of digestion on these ETH outflows, and then as ETH starts going up and the flows start happening, you have like a very like positive reinforcing cycle go on that can be very bullish for alts. And I think it's a lot easier for people to rotate from ETH or original like existing ETH holders to rotate into alts. And there's also a ton of like on-chain coins that have their pairs against ETH. So like if ETH goes up, no one even has to come and buy their coins. They just like naturally drift up with the price of ETH. So there's a lot of, I think, bullish like elements here on the ETH ETF that didn't really exist on the Bitcoin ETF.
Mike, what do you think?
For altcoins.
I'm just thinking about, Dylan, you talked about how, kind of DeFi summer and thing, how you think those DeFi protocols are, will have higher activity. But I'm trying to just think of like how, like, this will certainly bring in more people who know about ETH, but like, will it bring in people to kind of use those dApps and buy those tokens, or is it still going to be the people who, like us, who are in the market already, and that activity will and we'll be just simply driving that activity, and will that be enough to catapult alts higher?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Things get really crazy when like we have higher prices and like more retail gets involved. But like just the act of ETH going up like makes these DeFi protocols worth more, because now they're like controlling more value. They charge higher fees. Like now they should be worth more, like on a fundamentals basis.
Agree. I mean, I didn't see it that way, but now that you mentioned it, and I start thinking about how the fees that they generate in dollar terms, because most of the fees are ETH based because they're smart contract based, are now, the protocols are generating more fees. The fees are generating higher prices. There's just the natural ETH, the pairs to ETH. So I kind of now hope that we do get that ETH pump. Ro, what do you think?
Yeah, I will just say first that Duncan, I thought that point about like ETH going up and the sort of revenues that these protocols make going higher is pretty interesting. On the other hand, the capital that goes into the ETH ETF, similar to Bitcoin, it's not like they're going to all of a sudden discover DeFi or anything like that and start moving stuff around. However, what I do think is fundamentally different and quite interesting is I do think the ETH spot ETF paves the way for potential ETH spot plus staking yield ETF. And if I've learned anything about boomers over the past, decade of my life, is that they love yield. Like boomers love yield. And if they can get a whiff of that yield on that ETH ETF with staking, and Hester Pierce was on record saying yesterday it's not off the table, and who knows, maybe she's the next SEC chair. Then they're going to be like, well, what how's this yield being generated? Oh, proof of stake. Like, wait, you could stake ETH. Like, what does that do? And then there's like they'll explore EIP 1559. We have to remember we're ahead of the curve on a lot of the understanding of this. These guys are going through the whole 2017 thing of like, whoa, I don't just have to own Bitcoin, I can own ETH too. Look at this horse. They're going to go through that revelation, but on a generational scale with billions more dollars than anyone in crypto has. Like this is the boomer wealth. This is like real money, and that's exciting. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just like I'm expecting the boomers to like buy the ETH ETF and then jump into the alts, but it's just like if the boomers buy the ETH ETF, the ETH price goes up, that creates like a wealth effect among the other ETH holders who are like more willing to take risk on alts, right? Whereas like in Bitcoin, it's not really the same thing. Like they buy Bitcoin, definitely the people buying the Bitcoin ETF aren't buying alts, but then the other Bitcoin holders that like gain from this appreciation, they're typically staying with Bitcoin too. Whereas ETH is like, they're much more willing to kind of go into the alts.
On that thesis, are you saying that probably the best trade on the market right now is to buy ETH-centric altcoins? Lido, ENS, Velodrome, Aerodrome, all these like ETH-centric things. Because from what you're saying, if more people, if the price of ETH goes up, more people stake ETH, Lido is going to make a lot more money. Rocket Pool is probably going to make more money. Frax is probably going to make a lot more money. The restaking protocols are going to make a lot more money. Like, what would you say is the trade now? Is the trade now to be in ETH beta plays, as they're called?
Yeah, I think like the ETH beta plays have been really difficult. Like, there's a few I like particularly like, but I think you have to be really selective there. And I think if this cycle happens, you'll have a bit of time to enter into those alts. But I think like if the ETH ETF starts to like surprise to the upside, we start to get ETH moving, like I think then that would be a good time to allocate into kind of these DeFi names or some specific alts that you like. But you have to be pretty selective, I think.
Well, when you say selective, where would you put your money?
Okay, personally, I have a big position in Banana Gun, which is like the leading Telegram bot on Ethereum. They've also launched a product on Solana. They're making something like 50 million a year annualized over the past few months, and they pay 40% out of it to holders. So that's like my favorite alt for ETH. I've written about that a ton on Twitter, but obviously I own some.
Yeah,
I've also got a big decision in Banana Gun, a big position in Banana Gun. I've got to be honest. I've got your tweet here. I've been a holder of Banana since they launched. Again, I do think that they are sharing revenue. But I mean, look, surely you got others. Surely it's not just Banana Gun that you're looking at, right? Like, surely you're looking at some other ETH players. You can't be a one shill pony.
Yeah. It's honestly, it's just this market, because of all these new coins launching, has been very difficult, because it kind of like, if not enough new capital is coming in and a bunch of new coins are launching, then inevitably it just kind of dilutes the capital among all the existing coins. So you have to kind of be very careful. I think if some things were to change, like, the ETH ETF is going really well, we maybe get some more retail money in, it becomes a much easier environment. But, up until that point, I think you have to be pretty selective.
Okay. Ro, what are you buying? What are you thinking? What is the best trade now in the market?
Yeah, I will also just add, Duncan's the banana price versus ETH. I think Duncan first told me about it when it was like $40-50, and ETH was 3,800. So I think now that's worked out relatively well if you were to swap ETH into banana. But for every single example of that, there's like something like, you buy Arbitrum at $2 and things can go really awry. And I've said this before publicly that I think, if you have a bullish thesis on, let's say, Ethereum for whatever reasons, X, Y, and Z, ETH ETF inflows, it's often tragic to have the right idea then like lose the expression on like chasing too much beta for it. So I would say for most people, right, for people that are comfortable not having to maybe think too much and still be like fine, like ETH itself is arguably still the best ETH beta in some ways, particularly for this move. Now, and this kind of is in line with what Duncan said, things that own a lot of Ethereum or hold a lot of Ethereum in their treasury and have revenues directly correlated to Ethereum, things that have particularly like extensive amounts, like stuff like Eigenlayer or Lido, those are probably the most direct ways of kind of thinking about how an increase in ETH price and an increase in revenues can affect those tokens. But that's like a very close connection. As you get further down the curve and iterations that it has to take, like, for example, like maybe some like DEX tokens or lending market token, it's not exactly as one-to-one. So yeah, then you're starting to go off the deep end. So I would stay really close to ETH and like the things that are very adjacent to Ethereum with a lot of ETH in their natural TVL.
Okay, I have a different view, but we'll get there in a second. Mike, what do you think?
Fair enough.
So, I'm more of the early stage guy. I'm not so much of the, liquid token market thing. So I tend to have the barbell approach, right? Like you buy the kind of the OG. I totally agree with what Ro and Duncan say. Buy kind of the OG ETH-centric tokens, something like a Maker or something that is relatively close to ETH, and then I'll gamble a small part of my portfolio on just the crazy stuff at the down in the 600, 700 on CoinGecko and stuff like that, right? That's somewhat close to ETH. So I got that barbell approach, but most of my activity is going to be in the very early stage, pre-seed, seed startups. So yeah, I don't have anything so in depth to add there, but I think that's just typically my approach. Buy the stuff that's close to ETH. More, for me, the ones that are making real revenue, real adding value, and then gamble a little bit on the ones lower down the list on CoinGecko.
A lot of people think because the ETH ETF is going to get approved, Solana is going to run, because then the market's going to look forward and say, okay, well, the next ETF is the Solana ETF. Like, is that far-fetched, or is that like a real thing?
Yeah, Ro probably is the best
well, I think that's what people who are currently positioned in crypto today that we talk to would maybe like to see. But I actually think that if you're talking about likely DEX ETF, and I've spent a good amount of time thinking about this, you got to like teleport back to like GDAX in 2017, 16. Like, what was there? Like, well, Litecoin makes a lot of sense. That's like silver to Bitcoin's gold. We can debate whether that makes any sense. Like,
it makes zero sense. We don't need to debate it because it makes zero sense.
Yeah, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, unironically, like Ripple, these things. Ripple is fun. It's crazy, but I think Solana is actually further down the curve, even though these regulators and stuff, they don't care that much about what's being the most used per se. They don't know that Solana has a lot of activity and meme coins, and people love it as like the third horse of the ETH BTC Sol thing. They're like, give us the one that's like definitely not a security and like boomer friendly. And again, boomers love silver, right? They like commodities. So if I had to guess, I would actually.
Please say it's not Litecoin. Please say it's not Litecoin. Please.
I would say it's Litecoin. I'm sorry. I would say it's
I
Litecoin.
think
I'm so sorry.
There has to be
I
a
hate to
demand.
say it.
There has to be a demand, and I don't think there's going to be a Litecoin demand, which will make it not viable for any of the ETF issuers to create the ETF. I just can't see them creating a Litecoin ETF. And also, I mean, VanEck already applied for the Solana ETF. They've kind of put they've put the chips on the table, bro.
Yeah, I didn't say it would do well or have any inflows.
Yeah. No, I definitely think the Solana trade is interesting here, especially when you pair it with, there's a whole bunch of things happening. Like you have the Trump angle, which is like, more friendly SEC chairman and regulation there. You have like VanEck and 21 shares already filing for it. That starts the clock on the 19 B4s, which expire, I think, in like March 2025. Plus, you just have like, I think a lot of new marginal users are coming into crypto using Solana. Solana is 1/6 or 1/5 of Ethereum's market cap, and it seems like it has a lot of the mind share. Fire Dancer is going to be, I think, live by within the next year, by the end of the year. Yeah. They just did their first like transaction on testnet, which is going to take Solana TPS. I was just talking to like 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗪's head of research about this. He thinks from 3,000 TPS currently to 10 to 30,000 TPS. So you're talking about like half an order of magnitude more in scalability. So it seems like a lot of stuff is happening on Solana.
I'm super bullish Solana. I think Solana, like that for me, I've seen it all. For me, that's the big one. I think ETH's great because of the ETF trade, but I think ultimately, for me, the big thing is the Solana trade. Sorry, I killed my phone there. Let's talk about, we've got about 10, 15 more minutes. I want to talk about some other narratives. So let's talk about some other narratives which you guys are looking at. Here, I'm going to look at Mike because Mike, you're the early stage guy. So you're looking at all the narratives. I must be honest, like when I think of all the narratives that have run this year, you had the Cosmos narrative, which ran very early in the year. That was like the injective protocols, the _𝗘𝗓𝗔𝗬s, etc., etc. Then we had gaming. We had gaming have a crazy run and then collapse. Then we had the AI run, which was the big AI run. Are those going to come back, or is something else going to run now? Because it's kind of like feels like gaming had a good run early in the thing. Cosmos had a good run early. AI had a good run early. Can we expect the same narratives to run, or is it going to be different narratives running? Mike, you're best positioned here because you're seeing the VC market.
Yeah, I still think there's a lot of activity in crypto and AI. I think that I think the hype died down, and I think like you see a lot of tokens are just trading at like thousands of multiples of revenue, which is like insane. So I think it's a good thing that hype died down a bit, but I think there's still a lot of there's just such a white space of things that can be built with the intersection of crypto and AI that I think we're going to see that narrative come back when a lot of these products hit the market, and then there's going to be some real usage, which admittedly there is not that much real usage out there right now. And I think that we're seeing in the early stages of the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? We talked a lot about Bitcoin as the asset, but now that with the advent of ordinals, with the
runes.
advent of Bitcoin layer 2s, runes, and all these new standards that are continually being built and improved, and then OpCat, and just being able to do so much more with Bitcoin, and just with the hundreds of billions of dollars that are kind of sitting on the sidelines, that not all of it is going to be deployed, but I think a lot of people wanted to want to put Bitcoin to the use, right? So all of the things that are getting built there. Okay.
So in terms of the Bitcoin layer 2s, I mean, there's some good layer 2s on the market. There's Stacks. There's a BitLayer is not on the market yet, but certainly is coming out there. There is a build on Bitcoin. Is that what it's called? Build on Bitcoin. Build on Bitcoin. Who do you see as the front runners in the Bitcoin layer? Let's call it the Bitcoin ecosystem plays.
I mean, certainly think Stacks has a relatively big head start, but I think there's so many different models that you see. And there's some that are like Arch Network that are building building smart contracts right on the layer one itself. I think I saw a crazy number. There were like over 200 Bitcoin layer twos in development right now. So I still think there's even those stacks has a head start. There's overall the TVLs are pretty low, and overall all the apps and the primitives like the dexes, like the stable coins that we see are already very mature in Ethereum and other chains, other smart contract chains are just now being built as well. I think there are some that have done a great job marketing, and certainly the technology is being built, but it's way too early to pick a winner, because we're just going to see the similar development on Ethereum that happened in 2018 to 2020 is now happening on Bitcoin, and even faster, I think, because a lot of the builders have learned from all the mistakes that are being made in other smart contract ecosystems.
I must say, I agree with you to an extent, but I also think that Bitcoin, the protocol, is very, very, very limited in terms of the smart contract capability. And I think that all the good smart contract platforms or layer twos on Bitcoin are actually in some shape or form using ETH. If you think about Bob's actually, it's a omni layer, they call it, because it's Bitcoin and ETH. And I think there's a lot of limitations when it comes to Bitcoin. So I don't see Bitcoin replacing ETH. I do see a lot of very interesting applications that are going to be built on Bitcoin, but it's certainly not going to be one protocol Bitcoin. I think ETH is always going to be, or ETH or Solana are going to be the smart contract layer one blockchains. But I do think there are interesting uses on Bitcoin. So you said you're excited about Bitcoin layer 2. You're excited about AI. Ro, what are you excited about?
Yeah, and in terms of all the categories you mentioned earlier, I think agree with Mike that some of these that less so maybe on Bitcoin L2s, but on AI for sure. There's actually some fundamental stuff there, and the prices got ahead of maybe the traction, but we're still very early in that market. I think some of the things that may not do well, and I'd probably stay away from, are things like the metaverse gaming kind of things. Those tend to be like sort of one cycle or one pump ponies in a sense. You look at like ApeCoin, decentralized, 𝗥cie, Sandbox, like down 94 to 96%, participated 0% in the rally this year. Well, a little bit, but very little relative to the majors.
You know that 𝗥cie still has 75,000 daily active users, which is like,
that's mind blowing.
It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing that they have 75,000 daily actives. It's bigger than any other app, and bigger than probably most other apps in crypto.
But to give you the bullish one, I think it's DeFi. I think it's tokens that are application-specific platforms, particularly in the context of the election, with JD Vance and with potential SEC replacement, and like what Duncan was alluding to earlier with Ethereum going higher and creating a positive feedback loop. So yeah, things like Maker, Uniswap, some of the older stuff, some of the newer stuff, things that have good working products, like good users. And those guys are, I think, doing the right thing now, which is focusing more on UX and accessibility, because the block space is there. And as that gets better and improved, and you have a path towards actually like giving your token holders some sort of value accrual, I think that's going to form a narrative that's kind of ebbed and flowed in and out of the market a bit. But now it's more tangible than ever before. So it's maybe, it's a little contrarian maybe because DeFi is not talked about too much. But I think, DeFi has some serious potential here as a good narrative, especially into Q4.
Okay, so you're bullish the DeFi tokens. When you say DeFi, are you bullish the old DeFi tokens, like the Uniswaps, or are you bullish the DeFi, the protocol, like the Compound, the Aaves, or are you bullish the new Solana DeFi layer, which is like the Radiums and like when you say DeFi,
or even like the Caminos, like just things that exist on L1s that have a lot of users, TVL and daily fees generated, and are working well for their users, like LPing on Camino or using Maker to borrow, or just using Uniswap generally. Like those things that have that traction already, but like their tokens are kind of whatever. I think that's the category I'm talking about. So like not all of DeFi, like the things towards the top of the list, we're not talking long tail stuff that could grow into potentially getting users in the future. That's not going to change because of this environmental change. But the stuff that exists, I think, could reprice for sure.
Okay, Duncan, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess with Ro on that, like on the DeFi side, just stuff that has revenues that now there's finally going to be clarity in the crypto markets. We're going to get maybe these will be priced correctly and they can give some revenue back to token holders. So I always like stuff that makes sense on a fundamental basis. and actually has some sort of like, you know, valuation in reality. I guess where I disagree with Ro, I think that definitely on the gaming side, there's been some killer things that have happened, right? Where it's like, you know, insane pumps and then they just kind of don't live up to the hype at all. But I still think on a fundamental basis, like the idea of digital ownership in games makes a lot of sense. So I hope, like, I'm always kind of keeping my eye out there because I think that I could really see, like, you know, a World of Warcraft type game that's like super immersive. You add a financial layer on top of it, could be huge in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I heard. Go ahead, Ro.
Well, I think theoretically, I mean, you could lean a little bit on Web 2 gaming data to think about how likely that might be in crypto. You're seeing like AA and indie game studios outselling by a lot, sometimes orders of magnitudes, like AAA things that have some element of financialization, whether it's like, you know, skins or loot boxes or something. And I think from the traditional gaming crowd, you know, they've sort of steered away from having over financialization in games. Like empirically what they want is like something good built that they can pay for once and deal with it. Now in the crypto crowd, because everyone in crypto, like a lot of people played RuneScape growing up, and you know, it'd be cool if, you know, RuneScape things had value and stuff. But I don't know, like I don't see crypto people like spending a lot of time like, you know, going and playing games, because like trading perps in and of itself is quite an engaging game.
But I think it's like these people who played these traditional Web 2 games that have like, you know, invest so much time into them, you know, play for hours a day. And then you just add this whole other element, like this financialization, which, you know, we've seen with 𝗥𝚗𝗃 and stuff can attract a ton of players, but that was more like a play to earn inflationary model that's not super sustainable long term. But like imagine that those kind of dynamics, that element, but on a game that's like already super fun to play and already has like hundreds of thousands.
No, I hear you. Like there could be an EVE online of crypto. Like I've never played EVE, but EVE has like these massive battles that have real financial weight. Like people are apparently losing like a lot on these ships and stuff. And I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Because instead of it being play to earn in this sort of like PvE kind of thing, it's more PvP, and there's a net flow of capital between players, and it's more like poker in a sense. Plus, you know, you can earn some through the game as well. That is a sustainable economy, and I theoretically would like to see it. I don't know if anything is close right now, and I've invested Angel like over the years at a couple.
And by the way, guys, Banana just is up 35% alive. So
God loves banana, bro. He loves the banana. He loves the banana.
I should have bought it at the beginning of this recording.
It's at $75. So that's kind of crazy. I think there's actually a headline that came out.
Oh man.
Anyways,
Duncan, I mean, you're obsessed. You're more obsessed with banana than some of my ex-girlfriends are obsessed with me, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the gaming question, Ran, you know, I think in the past, like you said, it was like all play to earn. These games were so bad, right? They were terrible. They were so bad, but they brought in a lot of players that were interested in the speculation and the earning part, right? And I think we've seen that you know, these games learned a hard lesson, right, when the bear market came. So I think that just dumping, you know, just throwing financialization on top of a crappy game is not going to get it done. I think that lesson's been learned. I think a lot of the games that are coming out now are way higher quality, you know, and the focus on the game first and then the financialization of it as a secondary aspect, I think is a good catalyst and a really good approach to be able to actually bring in real players that'll stick around.
Is there any game that you've seen in Web 3 that can rival the Web 2 game?
Oh, I was just going to mention that. Well, Mike, you can go first. Then I'll.
No, I don't have a good answer for that. So go ahead, Ray.
Well, you know, disclaimer: I angel invested in both these companies, but I think they're actually pretty. I forget what the new. So this one's called. It used to be called Gunzilla. Now
Yes, Gunzilla. We also invested in Gunzilla. Yeah.
And Shrapnel. Both of those look like pretty good PvP shooters. They have some legs. The graphics are good. And this is to Mike's point. People have to come for the game, and then the financialization is sort of like this, you know, little icing dusted on top. But the game itself has to be good. I think those actually do look promising. So I'm not like, you know, I'm not like, you know, avoiding gaming with the 10-foot pole. I just, you have to be cautious, right? Yeah,
there's a game that I invested in called 𝗙𝗘𝗵𝗂𝗧𝗏, and it's doing Minecraft, but like, I guess like adding all these crypto incentives on top of it, and like adding, so basically rebuilding Minecraft, making it backwards compatible, and then also like adding on the ability to have these like digital items in game. And Minecraft is like one of the oldest games, you know, still has like 100 or 150 million monthly active players. They're just making it better. They're making it free, and they're adding crypto on top, which like that's the type of game that has like, hundreds of thousands or like thousands of types of game modes, like that type of stuff, like Minecraft, Roblox, that have such a big mind share. I think has a lot of potential there. So that's one that I'm excited about.
All right, guys, listen, we're completely out of time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the alpha. Thank you so much for the crypto love. We'll see you guys again. I hope we'll see you guys all again on the channel. It's been absolutely amazing. Until then, trade well, my friends.